All right, everyone. My name is Hector Lopez. I'm a commercial real estate broker. Fernando and I, he's my business partner. We formed something called Legacy Commercial Partners, where we, basically take care of all the commercial needs, for our clients and also colleagues. So we're going to learn today how to make money in commercial real estate. I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible. I'm going to try to fly through it. If you have any questions, just raise your hands. Feel free to interrupt me at any time. And then after, we can go ahead and get into any specific details or any questions you guys have with your current clients. Okay. So main three things we're going to learn today is who to represent, how to find the property, and broker fees. Okay, how those fees are paid, what you should expect, what you should be asking for. So before we get into who to represent, we need to know the types of commercial real estate there is. Okay, commercial real estate is not just all of it. As a commercial broker, we don't handle office, industrial, hospitality, multifamily, land, retail, and special use other. Okay, we essentially pick like 2 or 3 that complement our style and what we actually want to do. So, for instance, my main thing that I like to work on is industrial because that has its own. So, residential would be equivalent to industrial. Just doing one thing is one small section of commercial real estate. Office is very close to industrial, surprisingly. Office, because there's offices within industrial, that kind of classifies them both about the same. And then land. Those are the 3 main things that I specifically work on. We have a junior named Vanessa who handles the retail. That's specifically what she does. And then Fernando handles mostly multifamily, industrial, and a little bit of land. We don't really focus on things like hospitality. Office, not so much office, and especially not special either. Those are little niche, areas that you have to really just specialize in, 1, 2, or 3 at the max. Okay, so this is the 7 most common ones. So who to represent? So first off, I get this a lot. I get a lot of calls for a lot of referrals on businesses. Don't work on businesses. Okay, businesses they typically will not come with the real estate, so that's something that you need to have an attorney actually help with. Okay, those fee structures are completely different based on profits. They're assuming leases, so you can basically consult on their current lease agreement or possibly their purchase of the property that they're in, but actually selling a business, that's a whole different thing. That's not something that us as brokers do, okay? So try to just stay away from businesses, refer them out to somebody who specifically does that. Usually it's going to be either attorneys or business brokers, okay? So when you run into someone who is looking for a space to either lease or purchase, because leases are a major part of commercial real estate. It's not just the sales. Okay, and I know leasing has a bad connotation when it comes to residential because the money's just not there for that. Okay, but it's completely different when it comes to commercial. Okay, so you need to determine their needs. So a couple questions you want to ask them is, what is their use? What is their industry? You'll notice anyone right now trying to make face masks for in industrial for this economy, it's not a good idea. The pandemic has slowed down. Everyone tried to do that. Now somebody starting a face mask business in 2020, whole different story. Then you want to actually focus on that type of thing. But in these days, it's not that great of an idea. It's not really booming. Their square footage. Their square footage is huge. That will determine how much commission you're going to make. That's going to determine where you're going to put them and what zoning they need to be in sometimes. Okay. Obviously, their financials, same thing that you would do with any other client. And then years in business is important because if they're a startup business, you have to treat them completely different. You have to have different strategies, and you need to speak with them on this is what we're going to need to do in order to get you in there. You need to create resumes. You need to have business plans. You need to have strong financials. So it becomes way more complicated because as a landlord, think about it. Would you rather have somebody who's been in business for 5, 10, 15 years with multiple locations, or somebody who has a job and wants to try to do this one thing as a passion project? It's a risk for landlords, and they typically don't want that. Okay. Location. I get a lot of calls for Los Angeles market, because I used to work that market when I first started. High rises, mid rises, that kind of stuff. I do not want to drive from here to downtown LA. Okay? The traffic, the distance, I can be much more efficient by working on things in the the Inland Empire or where I live, between where I live to where this office is, I specifically choose my areas. If someone's looking for something in El Monte, that's not that bad. That's kind of still within the 605 area, but I specifically have my areas that I stick to. Somebody wants to go look at Moreno Valley, I won't go. I simply won't go. So either I'll refer it out or I'll tell them, look, there's other options in Ontario you can take a look at, but Moreno Valley just won't go that way. Strictly just efficiency. Now, if you live out there, then it's something where you wake up and you can just go start doing tours, but you need to be very careful with who you represent, because if you don't know how Moreno Valley is, why would you work that market? That's just not your market, right? So you want to specifically know what's going on in your market, and you want to know their proximity, what areas they're looking, how close they need to be to schools. There are certain types of industries like smoke shops that cannot be within a certain distance of schools. So you need to understand what their industry is and what their proximity to certain things can be. Yes.
So what would you consider your market? What cities are you an expert in?
Pomona, Ontario, Chino. Those are my main ones. I can be in any of those cities within 10 minutes. Easy tours, be back in the office. And I know how many buildings there are in each one of those. I know how many industrial buildings specifically. Land is kind of hard to tell, but industrial buildings, retail spaces. So I know my market. And depending on what your markets are, you should know how many homes, what the median income is, and just how many schools there are, where the schools are, how good the schools are in your area. So if your office is here or if you live nearby, why not attack your backyard, right? It's so close. You could be the expert in your backyard. Why would you need to go down to Cerritos or down to Moreno Valley or Adelanto? It's just too far. Why would you go all the way up there? You can do a lot more locally because you're a lot more nimble in being where you need to be, okay? So do's and don'ts. There's certain industries that we just completely stay away from for different reasons, okay? The ones you do want to focus on are clean industrial. Those are easy to do. Clean industrial meaning somebody who distributes iPhone cases. Easy, clean. You don't have to worry about any sort of zoning issues or anything like that. You probably don't even need loading docks really for that. Thriving industries. Gyms were a thriving industry. They still basically are. What else? Tutoring centers are always needed. Dentistry has been booming recently. Tenant improvements. Anything that has little tenant improvements, like a gym, actually will not have too much tenant improvements. Okay, as a gym, all you really need is an open floor plan. They bring in their machinery. You have to worry about flooring. But tenant improvements are anything where the tenant's going to have to fix the actual building for their particular use. If it's anything general, like HVACs, that's something the landlord's going to have to do anyways. But you want to make it easy. Okay, you don't want to have to fight for this space to be available for what their needs are going to be. And then, as we spoke before, establish franchises. You want to represent clients who have multiple locations already, because when you talk to the landlord and you're representing the landlord on explaining who your client is, and you need to go to bat, you need to be able to tell them they have 4 or 5 thriving franchises right now and they're expanding into another. What you don't want to hear is they're downsizing. You don't want to hear they're not doing well, so they need to go into this, which actually happens sometimes. Yeah.
So what do you deem a thriving industry?
Distribution route, third-party logistics. That's been booming. I mean, with the way that the economy is going, there's a lot of signs of things slowing down. And they have a little bit, but especially in the last 5 years, your rents have increased 400 to 500%. Like somebody was paying 40 cents a square foot on 100,000 square feet. All of a sudden they're paying over $2, $2.10 per square foot. It's ridiculous what these prices are. Small stuff used to be expensive, right? And then the big stuff, you get wholesale prices down. Now it's the opposite. The small stuff is cheap. The big stuff is super expensive. So like Amazon. Amazon is a third-party logistic company. All they do is that they have a website that holds the products of their vendors, and then you buy what these vendors are selling on Amazon. Amazon will hold the inventory, right? Have the website, and they'll send you the items. They do all the work, but the inventory is actually not theirs. So when you do returns, it's not Amazon who's dealing with these returns. It's the person that's selling through Amazon that's dealing with these returns. Okay? So Amazon is technically just a third-party logistics company. That's all they are. They're just a middleman between vendors and the consumer. So there's actually a ton of companies that do what Amazon does, but they're in their own warehouses. So they'll still sell, and you'll know when you go buy something. On the right side, it'll say third-party vendor. It'll give you a couple options of who's selling that product. Those are the third-party logistic companies, which actually we should probably call them. That's actually no. So don'ts, who you really don't want to represent, and like obviously you can, but it has its challenges compared to the low-hanging fruit. Okay, so don'ts. Restaurants. Not only are you looking for a retail location, you're looking for a retail location that has to do with certain demographics. You have to understand restaurants are some of the riskiest businesses there are. Restaurants have to deal with a lot of equipment, so they're expensive. And then landlords typically won't like them because of fire hazards, and they will also not like them because pests. If you have a neighbor who is selling medical equipment, medical supplies, and right next door you have a taco spot that's not that clean, pests, and that is a problem. Okay, because insurance goes up as well. Startups, we mentioned those earlier. Pallet yards. Pallet yards are very desirable. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a couple people here that have pallet yard clients who are looking for something. Cities don't like pallet yards, okay? Because pallet yards don't produce any income for the city. Pallet yards are just an eyesore, and they're dangerous. I'm sure some of you remember the fires that have happened in Ontario recently. That was actually right in between two of my clients. So I actually went there, and what happened was my client's building caught fire. It's a recycling center. Someone threw a cigarette into a pile of cardboard or something. That caught fire. And the way the wind went was in between a 600,000 square foot warehouse and a pallet yard. Pallet yard caught fire, and the flames were just going in there. So cities do not like pallet yards. If the fire had been contained only at the recycling location, it would have been fine. But since they were next to a pallet yard, it was just a disaster. The whole thing went up. So stay away from those. Recycling centers, they're dirty, eyesores. I know it's like every city needs to have these, but cities also don't like them because they don't really produce very much money. Okay? And also with recycling, pallet yards, most of these are going to require a conditional use permit. The conditional use permit process is usually at best case scenario, 3 months, worst case scenario, about a year. Okay? And they're about $10,000. And that's for a simple conditional use permit. In the city of Pomona, if you wanted to put up a gym, that gym is going to require a conditional use permit, even a 2,000 square foot gym. So like a yoga studio, something simple, something maybe like twice the size of this room, you would still need to spend $10,000 to ask for permission to the city to do a study to see whether or not you can actually put this. So why would you work? Maybe what you do is you do work on a yoga studio, but in a different city that does not need a conditional use permit. Okay, Pomona's worked on it, and they've updated their downtown specific plan so that now you can go in there seamlessly. You go in for your business license, boom, you get it, you find the space, and you're in. But if you have to then go through a $10,000 process just for the application, 6 months minimum for that city specifically, just to open up a small spot, what's the point? I mean, you're just not going to make any money. They're going to be pulling their hair. It just makes no sense. Mortuaries, conditional use permit. Hospitality. So I know a lot of commercial brokers. We're a tight-knit community. I still do not know one that has sold any hospitality. And hospitality meaning motels, hotels. Those are just its own little niche. It's brutal. We've represented plenty of them in very good areas, but there's a lot of backdoor stuff going on there.
A lot of off-market.
A lot of off-market, overseas type stuff. Actually, the biggest deal I ever worked on was in the St. Regis in Newport area for $256 million. We were representing somebody overseas, and we missed the mark by $2 million because somebody had an in. So somebody paid $258 million for it.
Wow.
Okay. So there's always some sort of backdoor thing that happens with those kinds of deals. So I would just stay away from it. Gas stations, contamination stuff, land leases. Automotive, you just will not get paid on automotive. You do a maximum of a 1-year lease on automotive. 2,000 square feet, you'll know when we do the commission structures that it just doesn't make sense financially for you. And then land, if you're going to represent somebody who's going to purchase Land, banks don't like that. There's no income coming off of it. It's hard for them to make money on a piece of land besides parking trucks. But then you deal with the city not wanting just trucks to be parked in a lot. It just doesn't look good. It doesn't produce any money. It doesn't help anybody. So those are just things that you basically would just want to stay away from. You can do them, but you have to specifically focus and know that it's going to take a long time to get these done. Okay. We need to also financially vet the tenant. Okay. It's pretty simple for commercial. Now, when it comes to purchases, when you're representing a buyer, okay, you don't really have to worry about it too much. You look at their bank statements, and that's all you really need. Okay. The lender, I've only spoken to 2 lenders in the 14 years I've been doing this, because most of the time your buyer is going to be buying things cash. But 90% of our transactions are cash. All the other 10% that are using SBA, financing, it's pretty easy to get these guys qualified for business, and you'll know immediately whether or not they're going to qualify or not. Okay, so I wouldn't worry too much about buyers. Most of the time, they're cash.
Do they have the investors? Is that why they're buying cash, because it's a pool of investors to buy a certain, or is it when they?
No, they just have the cash.
Really?
There's some of the most successful people that we've known, because we know tons of millionaires and billionaires and everything in between. And there's 2 things they have in common: either they own a business or they're simply just investors. And those guys just have the money. It's kind of weird. If there's going to be financing involved, they'll finance after they close with their own money. So it's not even a group of investors, putting money together. It's just they usually have it. Yeah. Which is nice. It's fortunate. You don't have to worry too much about the financing part. Seriously, I've only spoken to maybe 2 lenders in all the transactions over the last 14 years. And that's just recently. Let's see.
Good question.
Yeah.
So if you have someone that currently owns a body shop, okay, and they're looking to get a space that is larger than what they have, to talk about 25,000 square feet. Is that something, and I think that's on the nose, and you say, and then the don't do's or whatever. Do you normally just say, no, I don't do them, or you say, let me refer you to this, or what's the logical explanation of that?
So this is the most I'll do. I'll pull up a couple of properties for them. I try to keep it very simple. I ask them all these questions on how long have you been in business, and this and this and this. How are the finances? They're like, oh, great. And they would say, oh, they're great. So I ask them, do you at least have $50,000 in the account? I usually do a year's worth of rents. That's how much I ask them for.
So 50,000 is usually the
It depends on the size. We have clients who pay monthly $300,000 a month.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So 50 grand is not going to do anything. They have to have at least $5 million in there, right?
Got
to
it.
at least be
Got it. So
solid.
so his current rent is $9,000. I should have that. He should have that.
There's 100 grand in there.
Okay.
Yeah, you could probably get away with 50,000, but a landlord's gonna be like, okay, they have reserves for 4 or 5 months
Got it.
because that money's gonna be rotated.
Sure.
So that's why what you want to ask is the most recent 3 months bank statements,
Okay.
right? Not 1 month, because you guys know what happens, right?
Yep.
They want to buy a property, they want to buy a house or
Put
whatever.
more money in there. Okay.
Throw a bunch of money in there.
So
and
you
it's not
ask
easy.
them, they have the reserves, they've been doing this for over 10, 15 years. They currently are renting a spot. Now they're looking to lease to a bigger spot or buy. What normally happens.
What I would do is I would send them a list of a couple locations after I've vetted them, and then I'll leave it at that. And I tell them, choose your top 3 to go look at. If those 3 don't work, I'm out.
Okay.
And usually we make them kind of jump through hoops.
Yeah.
Because you'll know how serious they are
Okay.
when they start sending you their bank statements. Right? So you want them to send you the bank statements, the tax returns. You want to see the profit and loss. You want to get a year-to-date financial statement. You want to get an application. You want them to be responsible and active. If they don't give you that much, with us, especially with body shops or automotive, we
don't chase. We don't chase.
We don't chase them.
And here's the thing. The nice thing about working commercial deals is typically you're dealing with businesses. These businesses have accountants. These businesses have CPAs that they work with, unless they have just a bookkeeper in-house. So those financials, they're not pulling them. They don't need to go online and go to their bank account and send you these things.
Sure.
They say, hey, Maria, can you send this to these guys? And it's very simple. We don't ask for that much. 3 months bank statements, you can get that over in 5 minutes on their phone, right? The most recent tax return, you want to see what the landlord is going to be looking for. Do you guys make money? And yes, you can. We've had companies that show a negative amount, right? But their gross sales could be $2 million. I think Donald Trump has, showed what a loss over the last, 10, 20, 50 years. It doesn't mean he doesn't make money. It's just that they know how to work the system to make sure that they don't pay, taxes to show a loss, right? So just because someone's showing a loss on their tax returns doesn't mean they won't get in somewhere. And the last thing is a commercial application. Again, in the last 14 years, we've checked credit maybe like 10 times on tenants, and we do roughly about like 20 leases a year. Landlords really don't care about credit applications. All they really care about is just
Money.
Show me
You
the
have
money.
the money.
That's all they care about. Okay? It comes down to landlords just wanting to know, and like now we've just gotten to the point we just tell them. In the event you don't pay your rent, how is the landlord going to pursue you and recover his losses? It's as simple as that. And if you're representing somebody who is leasing and their financials are not super, super strong, or they're a startup, what you do is you ask them for additional security deposit. As far as we've gone is 6 months security deposit. But there's a couple different strategies that you can do that I'll explain later when we get to the letter of intents and the offerings and whatnot. Okay, so how do I find the property? Everyone here uses multiple listing services, right? You guys use the MLS. I've never used the MLS, ever, okay? Whenever we look up anything on the MLS, Fernando, searches for it, but how much do you use it in our industry when it comes to commercial?
Maybe like 10%
That's mostly for multifamily.
multifamily.
We're talking about retail, office, industrial, land, maybe land a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But for everything else, you don't need it.
Even the multifamily, if it's under 5 to 6 units, it'll be in the MLS. Anything over that, you won't find it on the MLS.
But don't you guys have your own? It's
Yes.
It's an acronym. I don't remember.
I wish we did. I wish we had one dedicated one.
One,
Oh no, you have to pay for each one, right? If you want to put your listing in each one.
So you guys use the MLS, which is a good tool. We still use it. We put our listings up there. The big boys use it as well. But there's a ton of different options. Everything for us is basically privatized. You guys have one location, which is fantastic. Imagine if you needed 10. And you had to search in different areas to find different properties. That's probably like the biggest pain in our industry. So there's definitely a few. Bravitas is a multiple listing service as well. They're more like an international one. We don't really use them that much. The one that you're most likely referring to is CoStar and LoopNet. Okay, CoStar is the closest thing we have to an MLS. LoopNet is the same company. CoStar purchased LoopNet a number of years ago. LoopNet is the Zillow of CoStar. Okay, and they both cost differently. Okay, certain CoStar right now it averages somewhere around, it depends, $500 to $900 a month. LoopNet, it's essentially $70 to $100 per listing that you put up, unless you have like some sort of legacy plan or something like that. So it is very expensive. We do spend way too much money on softwares to replicate what the MLS is, and they give different information. Okay, if you were going to do this industry, I'd probably recommend doing both of these. You cannot really do one without the other. Imagine not having the MLS and only using Zillow. Imagine only using MLS but not using Zillow, Redfin, or any of those that populates. Like imagine if it just never populated and you only had the MLS just for the data, right? You kind of need both. You need the marketing aspect of it and you need the core information off of it. So Catalyst is a great company. This is my favorite company. I've been with them at least 10, 12 years with them. They are a broker-owned business. They are CoStar and LoopNet combined, just on a smaller scale, mostly industrial, office, and land. A little bit of retail, not so much multifamily. Okay, I love Catalyst. They are actually associated with AIR, who are the people who created the contracts. Okay, and as a member with them, you get Catalyst, you get access to their attorneys, which I talk to those guys way too many times during the week because I love reading contracts and nitpicking at little things and knowing how to modify certain things. And so AIR, Catalyst, that's what I would always use. That's my favorite one. Crexi is the new guy on the block. Crexi is basically replacing CoStar and LoopNet. At least that's their intention. And I really pray that they do not get bought out by CoStar, but they most likely will, because CoStar is just like the big boy, right? They've destroyed a lot of companies. They've inherited them. They've pursued them for different reasons. My prediction is in the next 8 years they'll buy Crexi. I really hope they don't, but because I think it's technically a monopoly at this point. But there's always fights going on in Washington, for this. But Crexi's great. I actually just signed up with Crexi. Great deal. It's like somewhere around $400 a month. They have great information. I'm trying to get rid of CoStar, or at least CoStar. The other way to find properties.
There's a way to get that off town, right?
Yeah. Cut that part. If CoStar finds out, there's going to be some calls there. The other way is surprisingly drive around. We try to do this at least we don't do it enough, but at least once every 2 weeks. Think about your city, okay? Here in Upland, the industrial area is where? 9th Street, right? If you're looking for a warehouse, 9th Street is where you want to go. If you're looking for retail, you go up and down Mountain, right? You don't have to drive around the entire city. Most of what retail is going to be in a certain corridor, as well as your industrial warehousing. So driving up and down the street, you'll notice something's vacant. And very simply, an easy way for you guys to make money, you can contact us or anybody else. But if you see a building that looks like it's 10:30 in the morning on a Wednesday, they should be open, but they're not. There's no sign. Either there's a transient sleeping in there, okay? It's haunted, or it's vacant and it needs a new tenant. And I have council members that see vacant buildings and they contact me and say, hey, there's a vacant building here, contact the owner. Because cities don't want to see vacant buildings. People break in, and we've had way too many stories to tell where this guy's got to go in there with a hammer to clear a building because there's a guy in there with a knife, and it's crazy. It's crazy. And cities do not want to see empty buildings.
And they cause fires too during the winter time.
We've had 4 buildings catch fire.
I'm trying to stay warm.
Yeah. Well, it was during El Nino time and just So driving around is a great way for you guys to locate any empty properties. Okay. And then networking. So I know residential doesn't really network with other residential so much, right? But there's probably a couple people that you're like, hey, I have a buyer that needs this. Do you have anything? Right? Do you have anything coming up? We do that, but with all the brokers, right? We have a client who needs this, and we actually send out an email to our network of brokers asking, we have a client who needs this much square footage in this time frame in this area, and this is what they do. And we send that out as a needs list, and we have other brokers tell us, hey, look, we have something off market. We have something coming up in 2 months. We have something here, and we work together to try to get a deal done before it even hits the market. So for us, we do a lot of work within our network, which I don't think is something that really happens with residential, right? You guys don't call another brokerage, like, hey, do you have anything coming up? Well, we actually do that. We do.
Yeah, I think with commercial, you'll find that you often work with a lot of the same brokers over and over and over. And so oftentimes what we do is establish a relationship where we can just call them up and say, hey, what do you have off market? Or they'll even ask us, hey, what do you guys have off market? Because a lot of times there's a lot of exchanging happening that you will never see on the market.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a good example. We have a client who we gave, we did a lease out here for 20,000 square feet of a warehouse. But he owns in Silicon Valley an 85,000 square foot building. He wants to sell it, but he doesn't want to put it on the market because he doesn't want his competition to know that he's going to sell the business and also sell the building. So then he called us up and says, hey, you know what, do you have a buyer? Want to sell my building, $27 million. So then I call my friends, the brokerage community, who I know, who already have a great connection with, and sure enough, we have somebody who's interested in buying in that area. So right now we're putting together an offer for the owner to see if he's willing to sell it at around $25 million. So you'll do those kind of deals once you've already established yourself for a very long time. in business.
And they will reciprocate the business as well.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be times where you're going to call them for their listings. And if you've done a deal with them, they're like, oh, I love working with that guy. How many times have you worked with an agent that you've worked with before and you're like, ooh, I like this person. I like how they work. I know I can trust what they're going to say. And how many times has it been the opposite? Oh, not this guy again. There's times where I get those calls and I'm like, oh, no. Send me an email. Yeah, I'll let you know. Because you already know the reputation of these people and who they're working with. Some of them are sleep bags. They really, really are.
You can take that off the video.
Yeah. There's going to be a lot of things we have to cut out here. Okay, so how to talk to brokers. So there's a lot of seasoned people here. How do you feel when you have a green agent calling you about a property? It's annoying, right? You're just like, oh my God, right? You're asking all the wrong questions. Like you're going to forget. You're asking too many questions. It's just annoying. Same goes with commercial brokers. If you're green in commercial, just because you're well established in residential doesn't mean you know what you're doing in commercial. And they will know that. They will pick up on that. I'm sure if you get 100 calls from different agents all day, you know how long someone's been in the industry, right? You automatically just know this person's brand new. This person's within 6 months. This person's, here in their career. This person knows what the hell they're doing, right? Same goes with commercial real estate. So please, when you call a broker, ask them or make sure you know the address of the listing. You'd be surprised how many times you get a call and they're like, hey, I'm calling about your property in Ontario. Which one? The one that's on Mission. Which one? Because most of the time, because it's one big corridor, we'll have multiple listings on that street. And it is something that drags out and it's super annoying. So you need to know the square footage, the address, and the unit number at least. Also, your own client. Know your client. Okay? You have to know what they do. You have to understand what they do. Again, I get calls where they're like, hey, I have a client who does distribution. Of what? Oh, of products online. Of what type of products online? Oh, it's grains. Okay, this landlord does not want any sort of food on the property due to pests, right? So it took so long just to get to that question that it's just like, thank you for calling. It's not going to work here. Landlord doesn't want that. So you need to understand what your client does, right? Sometimes it's temperature control stuff. Sometimes it's because it's food, grains. Sometimes it's just not allowed there, so it requires a conditional use permit. And the landlord doesn't want to wait 9 months for you to get your permit. So you need to understand what your client does because you will be asked. Okay, it's very, very important. For us, usually when we send an email to a broker, we ask, is it still available? How do we tour? Our client does this. Simple. Okay? Very, very simple.
And also know more or less the financials, like how much money they're making. Are they $100,000 company? Are they a $5 million company? Because that's going to matter when you call them, and they're going to say, well, our landlord only wants this type of tenant that makes this amount of money. And if that way you don't waste your time and you don't waste their time, they don't waste their time. You know what I mean? It's about efficiency. And you're going to have a lot of those calls.
So when you work on a listing that's $400,000 here in Upland, and you work on one that's $2 million here in Upland, okay, is it the same amount of work, or does one require more? No, same thing. Maybe just a little bit different strategy with your marketing, maybe you have higher quality pictures or something like that. Well, for us, it's about the same then. If you do a 2,000 square foot warehouse and you do a 200,000 square foot warehouse, they're relatively about the same. Actually, I'd say the bigger ones are actually easier. The hardest part is having a loyal client who's qualified, but the actual transaction and the search and all that, it's actually easier. Because when you ask for financials from a 200,000 square foot warehouse client, they have people that'll send it to you within minutes. So it's a lot easier. And then, okay, this one's super important. The tours. You can only tour Monday through Friday. Okay, 8 in the morning till 4 p.m. Do not ask for after the person gets off work. Do not ask for weekends. Don't let the word weekend come anywhere near the conversation, okay? Because they will hang up on you, okay? Or right there, they will literally not want to work with you. They'll just like, oh, yeah, sure, here you go. And then you just get ghosted, okay? I don't know why commercial brokers do that. I guess they just don't want to be, annoyed because of somebody who's green. If somebody's experienced, they already know Monday through Friday, this is the time frame. And keep in mind with the business community, It is their job to go look at these properties. It is their job to go look at these things during their business hours. On the weekends, a businessman does not want to go out and work. Okay? It is their job to find out their next facility. If they're an investor, it's their job to go find the next investment. And their job is typically banking hours. Okay? So always keep tours between 8 and 4. Oh, and do not call multiple times in a day. Okay? You got one call, one shot, and then send a follow-up email, and that's it. Because believe me, they will ghost you if you call them multiple times for multiple questions. I know it's a little weird, but that's how they always are. And our junior experienced that, where she was brand new, and brokers will look at your license number and know how new you are. They actually look at the number, and if it's like a 3, they're like, oh, I'm out of here, right? If you see a 001, you're like, oh, this person knows what they're doing, and they'll treat you accordingly, okay? Because they just want to deal with somebody who's professional. Because we get a lot of issues during transactions, and obviously residential does as well. And that's where experience really pays off, right? When an issue comes up, whether you can handle that type of thing. Like we had one property in Ontario, Emporia, where during the transaction we had the FBI, the ATF, Homeland Security, and DEA, right?
And the mayor and the
Yeah.
fire department. And
All showed to the property because ammonia was missing from this ice cold storage place. And ammonia, I guess, is used for bombs. So because ammonia was missing, that created a huge issue. Also, we find out 2 days before removal of contingencies, that the building is technically historic and that the roof is caving in. So they actually can't fix it because it's historic. So it has to be done a certain way. Right before closing.
not only was it was a danger to walk in there.
Oh, yeah.
And so as we're doing tours, we're walking in there, unknowingly, the tanks that sit on top of the roof are so heavy and the support is not as great that those things can come down anytime and crush anyone who's inside that warehouse. And sometimes you have very eager buyers who are looking to climb into things, right? And so we had a situation where one of the buyers wanted to get up on top of the roof to like sit, and I was like, no, go up there, and the inspector said, even the inspector went up there and he says, nobody is advised to climb this thing because this thing will come down. And so it was such a mess, but you have to know how to deal with all that, because not only are you having to deal with red tagging issues, right? The city was about to red tag that building, and so we're trying to close the deal before they red tag it, right? But it wasn't that we were not disclosing that to the buyer. We actually told the buyer, hey, the city's trying to red tag this. So there's so many issues. We had to get the city involved to have the new owner basically take on all those issues and sign a document stating that he was going to take on those issues. So it gets.
And then there was a 1031 exchange problem where the guy already his identification period was over. So he was all in on this property for $2 million. So he either bought this thing with all these issues of historic and red flag and all these different things, or he cancels escrow, pays the taxes on his other property for $1 million worth of taxes. So do you want to risk $1 million into buying this property, or do you want to risk $1 million automatically out to Uncle Sam? And these guys almost came to blows. So look, what we're trying to say is somebody who's brand new to this industry and this is what you experience, unless you know what you're doing, it's going to be a nightmare. And there's going to be lawsuits. We did close. And it was a miracle because both parties with their attorneys and their spouses were there, and they almost came to blows. Like they were in each other's faces, and just somehow, by the miracle of God, it worked. It's a whole other story. We have to go with a beer. Cut that out. Okay, submitting an offer. Okay, letter of intents. When you submit an offer, so let's start with for lease. Okay, for lease, you submit an offer on a letter of intent, and I'll show you guys an example right now. You do not submit some sort of formal car form. Forget car forms unless they specifically ask. Okay? I use car forms maybe once a year. Okay, I do not have that much experience with them. I've read them multiple times, but I do not have that much experience with them. You need to use AR forms, but specifically if you're representing a buyer or a tenant, you don't have to worry about that. All you have to worry about is the LOI, the letter of intent, which is on a Word document. Okay, we negotiate terms on a Word document. That's how we do it. So no car forms. Now for a sale, when you submit an offer to purchase a property, you do not submit a car form. You do not submit an AR form. You just submit a letter of intent still. The one that writes up the actual contract that is going to be used is the one that's representing landlord or the seller. They write up the contract. So you go letter of intent, counter, letter of intent, counter, whatever it is. You guys both agree on a non-binding letter of intent. The responsible broker that's representing the seller or landlord will type up the contract with no signatures from the seller, send it to you for approval. This is where attorneys go back and forth on language. And then the buyer finally signs. Okay? And sends it to the seller. Seller then signs after that. That is the custom for it. So it's more complicated when it comes to for us it seems simple. You guys do formal counter 1, counter 2, counter 3. I'm actually doing a transaction right now where it's counter 1, counter 2, counter 3. And then all the disclosures you guys have, it's a nightmare. I'm getting headaches just thinking about what you guys do. Which kudos to you. You have so many disclosures that the state asks you to do. For us, there's 4 total, and we give 3 of them up front. One of them is agency disclosure, NHD, property information sheet, and seller mandatory disclosure. Done. That's all our paperwork. Because remember, businesses and commercial, it's a lot less regulated, and businesses are more savvy with what they need to do, right? Somebody who works at the Home Depot, husband and wife who are purchasing their property, they may not have that much business experience to know what they're signing in all these documents. So they need the state to essentially protect them. When it comes to a business owner who has to pay, corporate taxes, property taxes, they have to go through city with business licenses, profit and loss, all these different things. They're a lot savvier. It actually says it in the contracts that the buyer is a savvy client and that they know how to actually do these transactions. This type of paperwork. So that's why it goes LOI and then a simple contract where everything's already decided. There's like maybe 4 check marks on the entire thing. So contracts are super easy.
And if they ever ask you to break down the contract, that's what you refer them to their attorney.
Yep. And luckily we have Rod Feldman, who's a great real estate attorney. We talk to him maybe like once, twice a month.
He'll owe us $500 for this.
I don't know. Okay, so here's an example of a letter of intent. So this is a warehouse we were dealing with, 30,000 square feet. For overflow, there's going to be much really use of the actual building. So the rents should have been way cheaper, but they're $1.20 per square foot gross, 3% annual increases, 1 year lease agreement, 2 years of a lease, 24 months, 2-year option to renew. 2-year options to renew. Sorry, 1 year lease and 2-year options to renew. So they're in there for 1 year. Landlord is basically going to be agreeing to granting after that expiration a 2-year extension and then an additional 2-year extension. So a total of 5 just spread out in different ways. We get paid on all 5 of those. Okay? We don't get paid on 1, you get paid on all 5. Okay? It's going to happen at different times, but yes, there are times where actually right now, 5 years later, I have a tenant who just called me, like, hey, my lease is expiring. It's been 5 years as of December, and that's all we have to do is just renew. We get paid essentially the same amount of commission as you did on the first transaction, which is 5-6%, whatever it is. So you don't really have to do much work on the
5
second
or 6% on your side, just the one side?
Well, we double into that one, so yes. And then the other broker that represented the tenant or the buyer also, gets that check. So you give them a call, a couple of years later saying, hey, there's a paycheck here ready for you. And they're like, thank you. Yeah. So that's where the difference is, where leasing sucks for residential, but it's awesome for us because we don't sign 1-year leases typically. This was a special case because it was somebody who was trying to decide what the future of their industry was going to be, because they already have 200,000 square feet down the street, and they just needed that overflow space.
That's just that storage.
Yeah, and then they were repairing some of it, so they might have been taking over the whole thing. So we were still like in a weird period where we didn't know how much longer they really needed it. They typically only wanted 3 months, really.
Yeah.
But
And it's desk storage because there's no bathrooms, there's no lighting, it's just
no offices.
yeah, there's just a big blank space, and they don't need the bathrooms, they don't need the lighting, they don't need any of that. They just need somewhere to store all their stuff so it doesn't get robbed or stolen.
So this is an example of the LOI, letter of intent, that you would use for a lease. Okay. We stayed in there what the client actually does. We stayed in there why they want to use the space, the terms, early commencement, meaning we want to start using the space as of this time, but we want to actually start paying rent at this time. We want so much rent abatement, which is 3 months of rent, to have time to move in or to repair or to do any sort of preparation that they need. Security deposit. If it's a new tenant, a new business, you can negotiate 6 months, like we talked about before, 6 months of security deposit. Now, we have one strategy that we do, so the tenant's not like, man, I got to give up 6 months, which in this case would have been, what would that been? Maybe like, if it was this tenant, it would have been $80,000 to $100,000 of security deposit. Well, that sucks. Well, what you do is, a year in, you burn off a month. So every year, the landlord is returning 1 month's worth of security deposit back until they have a maximum of 1 to 2 months of security deposit. After a year, the landlord is going to feel much more comfortable if this is a good tenant, so they're able to just give back some security deposit because the risk has gone down. Okay, that's one strategy that we do where tenant is happy, landlord is, I'm getting 6 months of security deposit. These guys ditch out on the lease, it's over, right? And if somebody signs a 5-year lease and you decide to leave by year 3, you're still on the hook for that last 2 years. And the entire sum is due at the point that you leave the property. What you do is you sublease it, and
And you do have sometimes you deal with companies that are they are shell companies. So they look like it's a company, they have all the paperwork of a company, but it's not a company.
it's a casino.
It's a casino.
It's an illegal gambling casino.
Right. And we've dealt with that, where
That
it's
happened
like
once.
we've checked out everything. Everything looks legit. But once they go in, it turns out it's illegal activity, and then you have to get them out, and then they lose their deposit.
I've always wondered about furniture companies and these little hole-in-the-wall things, and they're always somebody new coming in and sell furniture. Thinking, how are they making their money? I mean, I'm thinking, is it really a furniture company or what?
So there's a huge markup on furniture.
Uh-huh.
So when you buy a couch, they probably spend $200 to make it. They're selling it for $2,000, and they discount 50%, so it's $1,000. They're still making a pretty high profit on furniture. They make the money on the rents. They're getting a huge discount on the rents usually because the spaces are much larger. We've had a huge issue with big box retail ever since like Toys R Us went out, Circuit City went out, Fry's, like all these large retailers that are shrinking and shrinking. Remember, Best Buy used to be much bigger than what it is now. Staples used to be much bigger than what it is now. Probably a quarter, a fifth of what it used to be.
Yeah.
So big box retail, that's why they're not building them anymore. Big box retail has been an issue. And it's kind of being fixed by reverse logistics, kind of like these liquidation stores. Those are becoming very, very popular. But their rents are simply very, very low, so they can sustain paying their rents on time. And that's because nobody wants to go into these huge places, only furniture, because they need showrooms. So that's how they typically have
I'm
very
talking
cheap.
about these showrooms that are in these little strip malls that are small.
Oh, that's right.
Those type of furniture places, that's what I'm wondering. Not the big ones. I'm talking about these.
Like the little ones.
Yeah, the mom and pop
Well, they get paid per square foot. Most of it is going to be online sales.
Most of them don't survive either. I mean, like after you'll see them there for like a few years, and then
Oh, that's why there's a turnover.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's why you do a 1 year lease. Or in the mall, I think you actually do like month-to-month leases.
yeah, they have a very high failure rate.
Yeah.
So
So that's why you
especially
don't-
retail. It's a very tough industry because we see a lot of empty spaces, and a lot of people ask us why hasn't this been filled up? Well, who the hell wants to take on 80,000 square feet? You see all these empty Kohl's, empty Sears, empty Kmart's, they've been empty for years.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to take them on.
Just down the street, Mountain, where the CVS is, that spot is finally getting filled. It'll probably be in the next month or so by Queen Furniture or something like that. So it's a furniture company going. But how long was that place vacant? What the landlord should have done is drop the price dramatically, do like a teaser rate to get somebody in there, and then just start increasing rents over time. It sucks because you're giving away, at half price of what you should be receiving, but half is better than nothing, right? You have to some sort of.
But you're also dealing with a lot of owners who have so much money,
They don't care.
they really don't care if it's vacant for a very long time.
Legitimately, they will just hold on to it. They don't care. It's a write-off, losses and whatnot. So let's see. Let's go on to the sale one. This is a sale letter of intent. $1.8 million, Maple Bravado. Earnest deposit 3%. Purchase price. Let's see. Contract of use is going to be the AAR. That's the one we prefer. Financing again. See this one all cash. Title, escrow. Those are chosen by the seller. We represented both on this one. So 45-day blanket contingency period, meaning for inspections, for everything, 45 days. The nice thing, and I'll tell you guys, cut this part out too. Oh, this is only for you guys. One major thing that residential agents forget about when they're dealing with AAR contracts is a passive waiver of contingencies. Okay? There's no signing off of contingencies. If by today at 5 o'clock your contingency is supposed to end, and it's 5:01, you have accepted all the terms. I don't care if you find out that, or you need to negotiate that the roof is caving in. Too bad. You have waived it. There's no need for any signatures or acceptance, nothing like that. It's just a passive waiver. And you'd be surprised how many times people make that mistake. And do we tell them? Of course not. You know what you know. You don't know what you don't know until you don't know it.
We used to have a passive clause years ago in our contracts.
Yeah, I absolutely love it.
That was
Yeah.
years ago.
Because again, your normal consumer, and I just think about my sister, right? Like my sister buying a house, she doesn't know contracts. She doesn't know all these different things. She's not in the industry. So you have to have so much knowledge just to be able to buy a house, right? So that's why the state, the federal government needs to protect the average consumer. But when you're talking about a businessman, somebody who has a team of attorneys, accountants, and all these different things, they should know these things. They should read the contracts. But look, how often has somebody actually read the contracts you guys have given out? Right? Such a few times. How many times have they asked you just questions? Hey, what am I signing here? Very few times. The dentist gets so mad at me because they're like, here, sign here. I'm like, what am I signing? And they're like, what do you mean? It's like, what am I signing? Tell me what I'm signing. They're like, you're supposed to just sign. It's like, am I going to just sign? Yeah, because I like to read contracts. So for us on AAR, it'll be a contingency period, and then we have days to close after the contingency period. So in this case, it's 15-day close after. So the contingency period is 15 days less, then we close 15 days after that said date. Okay? If there's an extension of contingencies, our escrow is extended by just whatever it says on the close of escrow days after the expiration. That was probably super confusing. But essentially, we just have the date on there of not what a total escrow is going to be. For us, it's separated into two. Contingency period and close of escrow days after. That's it. We don't have this is a total 45-day. No, there's always some sort of extension.
And the reason we use these LOIs is just so easy to go back and forth, red tag them, just make your changes, and then have somebody type up that contract. Yeah. Then having to retype it over and over and over is a pain in the ass.
It's too much. We use there was one we were representing a Chinese group in Pomona for 44,000 square feet. The tenant was Gold's Gym. Unfortunately, that did not go through. We were super close, but it was actually our client who had an issue with their partner and this whole different story. But that letter of intent that I'm showing you here was about 8 to 9 pages long. And we went back and forth for about 9 months on different things. Because you're talking about water restrictions, you're talking about city conditional use permits, the economy, CPI. There's just so many different factors that we were just going back and forth on different things. Because their rent was going to be $60,000 a month. But they required the landlord to give them $2 million to improve the building. So the owner had to take out a loan to give to them for them to do their repairs. It's very complicated. And to go back and forth on counter 1, counter 2, back and forth, it's just too much for what this is. Okay, so last one, the one everybody I'm sure is excited about is how are commissions paid. So we'll do a little bit of math, and I'll give you a couple of examples. Okay, lease commissions. So lease commissions. If we're doing a yoga studio, and Fernando, if you wouldn't mind doing the math on the calculator. So yoga studio. Should you represent a yoga studio? Well, unless you're Pomona, you can basically put them anywhere. 2,000 square feet. It's fun, right? 2,000 square feet. That'll go for what? About 25 square foot. Usually about 25 per square foot plus triple nets, and I won't go into what that really is too much, but triple nets are just the expenses of a building, okay, that you have to pay on top of it. Basically like an HOA, okay? So these will be like 45 cents. Now, you do not get paid on that. You do not get paid on the expenses that are triple nets, okay? And this is going to be, let's do a 2-year lease. Second studio, so they got 2 years. So that's times 24, right?
60 grand.
60 grand. Let's say you're representing both sides, because you guys can do the math if you don't. So typically for something like this, you're going to get
6%.
6%. So times 0.06 comes out to what?
3,600.
That's how much you'll make if you represent a yoga studio. That's 2,000 square feet for $1.25. But actually, there's one more calculation we have to do, which is on the second year. So let me go back with the account for increases. There it is. So year one. So what's 12 times $1.25 times 2,000?
2,000 times $1.25
Times 12.
times 12, 30,000.
Okay, so year one is how much?
30,000.
30K. Year two times a 3% annual increase.
So if you do 2,000 times $1.25, 2,500.
It's like 33, something like that. 33, 39, something like that.
I think it's 3,300.
33,000, right?
Yeah, 33. Yeah.
So then your total, what you sold to that landlord is $63,000 of rents for that 2-year lease. You signed a 2-year lease, so you get paid based off of that. So what's 63,000 times 0.06, which is 6%?
That's 3,780.
That's how much you'll make representing a yoga studio if it's a 2-year lease. If you sign them up for a 3-year, you get 50% more of that. Right? And the third year is another 3% annual increase.
And you should be able to get paid within 15 days.
Yeah.
So that's one shot. So
Yep.
you get paid one shot.
You get the whole thing. You don't get paid monthly. You don't get paid at the end of the year. Now, I would highly recommend that for this, you also negotiate an additional 3-year extension
So you get paid on that extension.
with a 3% annual increase on the extension every year, because then you get paid on that extension as well. And if there's another broker involved, then you, right? So it's pretty good money for just one small yoga studio, right? It's not bad. It's a hell of a lot better than a 1-year residential lease, right? You guys get paid what, $400, $500, which it sucks. I wish they would.
$100 sometimes.
No way, no way.
I don't do them, I just give them to the listing agent because I'm gonna waste some time.
Right. And it sucks because if you're able to sign maybe like a 2-year lease, and I don't know if you actually can, I don't know if state actually allows you to do that. You'd actually be able to make maybe like $1,000 or something, right? Somebody who's committed to 2 years, but it's just not what it is. Okay, furniture company. Let's do an example of what these guys probably did down the street. Furniture company is going to go in there for a minimum of 5 years. Okay, 5 years. You're probably going to go in there right now at $1 for that one. What, $1.40 on Mountain?
It's retail, right?
Yeah.
$1.40.
$1.40. Okay, so $1.40 for 40,000 square feet. Okay, $1.40 per square foot plus triple nets. But remember, you do not get paid on triple nets, okay, because those are expenses. So $40,000, $1.40.
It's 56,000 a month.
$56,000 a month. Times 1.03.
That's 57,680.
56,780 times 1.03.
59,110 with 40 cents.
One more time, or two more times. Let me just-
61,192 with 71 cents.
Okay. And last one.
63,028 with 50 cents.
Okay, so now do 59,410, just to make things easy. 59,410 times
12.
60.
12 times 60. 59,410 times 60?
Yep.
3.564.
And then times, on that lease, you probably get like 4%, times 0.04.
142,584.
That's how much commission is. What is it again?
142,584.
That's what the commission is for a 5-year lease. Okay?
The lease.
Yes, it's for a lease. And this was probably an easier transaction to do than a yoga studio.
Wow.
It's just you have to find the guy who's willing to pay $56,000 a month. And I just used the average of these numbers to do the math. It's a lot faster and easier today. But you would essentially just add up all these and then do that math. Okay? And then you'll get paid this again, actually probably a higher amount when they do the 5-year renewal. Because somebody who's going to be spending that much money on fixing that place up and getting it ready to go, they most likely signed a 5-year lease with two 5-year leases, extensions. Okay? Let's do the last one. The fun one, the one that we personally like to do. Distribution warehouse. 200,000 square feet, Fernando.
Yeah.
And this one's going to be disgusting because I feel bad for the tenants. They're paying way more than what they should be paying. But that's just what the market dictates right now. So 200,000 square feet. They're going to sign at least a 5-year lease. 3% annual. Let's forget about the 3% annual increases. You guys get the concept on that, right? Every year you just have to increase times 1.03, so it's self times 3%.
How much a foot?
What's Sean going to pay?
$1.80.
Yeah,
$1.80.
So this poor guy, we put him in a space for 70 cents a square foot. His lease is up next year. The new market is around $2, but because the landlord likes him, he's probably gonna give him a deal and give him $1.80. So what is that a month?
360,000.
Per month. Per month. So that's year one. So multiply that times 60.
That's 21,600,000.
How much?
21,600,000.
And then we get paid per the contract, it would be 5%.
That's 1,080,000.
No. So your commission on that would be that on the renewal. There's another broker involved, okay? But you'd be surprised the landlords do send out those checks. And it's nuts. I remember like receiving the first one, I was like, we're gonna sizzle it. You know, so
Buffet!
the China buffet down the street. So that's how you do the commissions on that, on the leasing. So leasing is a very good way of making money. It makes a lot more sense to do these, right? Residential leases, they just don't make the money because it's just not worth the squeeze. But with these, even a small yoga studio can make you a good amount of money. It's just how much time are you going to spend on a small space like that?
Now, there's the exception, right? Like with you guys, you have clients, you have long-term clients who are, wealthy, they do well, they come to you for everything. You don't want to pass up a small lease because you have that relationship, right? So that's how we are in a similar situation. We have a client that we sell a lot of multifamily to. And they buy apartments, they do this, they do that, but essentially they are a very loyal client to us. And so once in a while, they'll have an empty house and they'll say, Fernando, can you give me a tenant? I don't want to pass it up. It's a they're loyal and we're loyal to them. So then we'll do the deal. We'll just have a junior working, right? But we tend to service them because we want to keep that relationship going, right?
Yeah. So sale commissions, the math is pretty simple on that. The gross amount that you're selling is what you do the math on. But the reason why I wanted to go over this is because land, you will typically, you should be getting anywhere between 8 to 10% on land. Okay, the commissions are much higher than that. One time I think we got 15, just because it was a bet with one of our clients. So I was like, I bet you in the next 30 days I can find you somebody, and sure enough, you paid 15. Office buildings, standard thing, $3 million. You multiply times whatever the commission amount is. So lease with an option. We did a transaction in West Covina once for $4 million, where the tenant needed to go into the building to raise the roof.
Raise the roof?
And so every time I said that during the whole transaction, he just kept saying that. And so the buyer went into the building and leased it for a year, which means he waived all his contingencies by doing that because he already investigated the property because it was in it. And so we got paid for that 1 year, 40,000 square foot space lease. And they had the option to purchase. So what we did is during the option to purchase, because the intention was to sell the property, not lease it, but they needed to lease it in order to get their business license and just a bunch of different reasons why they needed to do it. And they went in there, fixed the building for their use, and then what we did was the commissions, they deducted the amount of commission that we made off of the lease. We got that deducted from what the sale commission was going to be. So that way it basically evened out. So that's how we got paid. So we got paid up front something and then the bulk of it once we actually sold the property. So sometimes you have to get a little creative because the landlord's like, well, I don't want to pay you, you haven't done this, like they're only going in here because of this, but it's not official that they purchased it, and it turned into a whole thing. And then the last one, this is the last slide, is...
What is it, with that client in particular,
Yeah.
How much money did we make him and how much at a time?
So we within a year, we told him, buy this property, because the property just was not selling. Like the broker that was selling it could not sell it. And we told him, buy this property. He bought it for $2 million. Yeah, he bought it for $2 million. There was a problem with the tenant, but we knew the contracts that they had and with their intentions and all that. Tenant moved out because they were paying like 30 cents or something per square foot. So horrible investment for you to buy. We bought it 6 months later, tenant moved out. We put this buyer in here and they bought it for $4 million. He made $2 million within a year. Yeah, very happy guy. Very, very happy guy. Yeah.
And now we're still doing business.
Oh, absolutely. His brother, his whole family, because he knows that we saw an opportunity for him. He took it, and it actually paid off very, very well. So very happy guy. Because everybody else was saying, "Oh, it's impossible. You can't get over $3 million for this property." And sure enough, we got $4 million, double his money. So off-market stuff. So once you get to roughly about $8 to $10 million in transactions for the sale of something, your commission is different. You don't get paid most of the time by a percentage. What you get paid is the owner wants $10 million for this piece of land. Anything over $10 million, you keep. So if you sell the property for $12 million, keep the extra $2 million. Certain properties will work that way. Okay. Most of the time, it'll be with Persians, Iranians, Pakistani, and Indians. Surprisingly, that's how it works. Okay. If you need to cut that, I'll cut that one out. Okay. But those are the ones that always say, "I want this. Keep whatever else you want." Okay. And that is it. Any questions? Okay. And my office is, I think, literally just down under this, right? So if you guys ever have any questions, you know where it is. You just go in there and ask away.
I'm still looking for the mix.
Okay. It'll come up.
I have a few questions.
Sure.
And I most of them you answer them through your whole class or whatever. And I think I know some of the answers, but I want to confirm.
Okay.
So, what type of licensing do you need for that? Just regular real estate license? Or you don't need a license at all?
Nope.
Okay. Number two.
Well, I mean, you need your real estate license,
Okay.
but you don't need a special commercial license right now.
Okay. For anyone that wanted to get into that type of industry,
Mhm.
what would your recommendation be for somebody coming in? Somebody who's been selling real estate their entire lives, or 20 years, let's say.
You would take a junior position
Okay.
with somebody who's experienced, and you focus on one. Well, we find out what we do with our juniors or with new agents that want to come on board is we find out what you like and what works well with you. Like for his daughter Vanessa, she's very good with meeting people and doing tours and kind of showing and going out there. Not so much with industrial and dirty. Like any industrial broker who has clean shoes is not an industrial broker. You should have scratches all over from kicking open, certain things. And that's not something she's going to do. Retail works very, very well for her in offices. She can show a picture of what somebody needs to do. With industrial, those guys don't care. It's where my truck's going to get parked, where we might throwing up stuff. We're good at that, but we find out what you're good at. Some people, it's multifamily, right? Multifamily is probably the easiest transition from residential because you use the same forms. Multifamily is done with car forms. You do not use AAR forms for that, even though I'm going to try. And so that's an easy transition, but it has its complications, just like anything else.
I will say, when I made the move from residential to commercial,
Okay.
when I made the move from residential to commercial, I gave myself a year. And I knew it was going to take at least a year to get some momentum. And when I did the entire year, I found that I closed one deal. It was a small lease that I worked with him
For a month. Because before that, you weren't working with anybody.
Right.
You were just trying to do it
I
solo.
was trying to do it solo. Well, I had a mentor, but he didn't turn out to be a mentor. And then, halfway through the year, the mentor, who was the mentor, hooked me up with Hector, who then Hector became my mentor. And so then we started working together. And so then in 6 months of working with him, 6 months prior, I learned nothing. In 6 months working with him, I just, all this knowledge just bombarded me.
Just
And
mom
then I
working.
closed one deal, and in 1 year, I made $580. That was my first year of commercial.
And you're like, wow, okay. Let me rethink this.
Because prior to that, I was
Sure.
doing residential, and I was making,
Of
six-figure
course.
income.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I made this transition, and in 1 year, I made $580. I said, I'm in. And he thought I was going to be done.
Yeah, because most people, especially when you start, most people are just like, I don't get it. Like, I had to go back to the drawing board so many times over these years to figure out the path, right? And sometimes it's just a slight correction. That's why I tell you, those don'ts, that took me 8 years to figure out. And don't work on those because they just don't pay out the way that you wish they would. And then within a year, maybe a year and a half after we started working together, and the way I like to teach is hands-on. So his first transaction was a listing I had. I was like, look, come do this one with me. I'll show you how to do it. Just listen. And I actually showed him just measurements of the building and what to say and whatnot. I think within 18 months, we were both top 100 in the United States.
Wow.
So it's very, very possible. It's just, you just need those small little tweaks. So if you were new to commercial and you wanted to start, you would need to pick your city, your market, pick which type of industry you want to go with, and then you just market, cold call, do the same thing you do with residential.
And then at the beginning, it's kind of difficult to figure out what you like, right? Because I kind of went from here to there, and luckily I had him to tell me, hey, focus, because I was always
He's in Gardena. He's like,
Yeah.
hey man, this
Hey,
real
look at
estate,
that
this is $5 million right
He's like,
here.
hey, focus. You need somebody to kind of get you focused, right? So I'll juggle between multifamily. And I'm always like, okay, yeah, but he's always like, hey, focus, because this is where you're gonna make your money. And so in the beginning, you have to figure out, what do you like? What do you like working? Do you like the big box industrial? Do you like the multifamily? What are the pros and cons? Learn which is your path, right? And choose that path. And then if it don't work for you, understand that, all the work that you made for that path, you're probably not going to take it on to the next one, because multifamily is worked differently than industrial.
It's way different.
Yeah. And so then And so then all the effort and everything and all the connections that you made, you're not going to take them on. So, and it's almost like residential. All the deals that I did in residential, done, right? It's like all of a sudden I started this new thing, and it's very difficult for me to, even go back to residential, right?
It's just mindsets. It's just different mindsets.
So
It's hard to transition from one to another.
the one thing that I did do when I made the transition over was I called all my past clients and say, hey, now it's time for me to get you into investments, right? And I started teaching them about multifamily, about residential income, about getting into the larger investments, and so that I keep getting a lot of calls from that, right? But for the most part, listings bring listings, and like brings like. So if you're gonna have a residential, if you're gonna have a industrial building, then you're gonna have other listings from industrial owners, because it's just works that way. Whatever you focus on is what you're going to attract.
So unfortunately, there was a time where I was working automotive. Okay, and again, I found out automotive is 1-year leases. They don't pay well, and you run into some shady people whose financials are not great because it's a lot of turnover as well. And so when I started working on automotive, I got more automotive and more automotive and more automotive because that's what my focus was on. So if I focus on industrial, I'm going to get more industrial. If I focus on big industrial, I'm going to continue to get the big industrial. That's just how it works.
Do you find it smart or easy or doable to have to do both residential and commercial as you transition for the sake of having that
Yeah.
income?
I'd say so.
So it's not something that it's unheard of, you shouldn't, it's more like if you have real estate transactions coming in, you're not gonna say, well, no, I'm doing this now. You continue to do them, but you're still focusing.
You can, but the path is going to be much longer.
Okay,
You're
so
better off
unless you go ahead and go
jump
dive
in.
in.
Just
Okay.
dive in.
Okay,
Just dive in.
Yeah, that's what I did. I just dove in,
okay.
and
Would you say, obviously the industry has changed a lot in the last year, and the year before, obviously because of whatever. But would you say, if somebody was to start today, would you say a year is a reasonable amount of time
Yes.
to get yourself,
Yes.
like, where now you can sustain yourself financially with that income? You
Yeah.
would say a year is good?
Yeah.
Because I know, if I was to,
So if you do what I tell you, and it's very simple, it's not difficult. If you just have the discipline and you do what I tell you, within the first month you'll get a listing. Within the first 2 months you'll have a closed transaction. Worst case scenario.
okay,
Oh, before everybody leaves, I just want to note, I have a 2 on the lot. I just put in the MLS. It's in East LA, 622 South Current. It's a main house and a small house. If
Okay.
anybody's
what's the price?
interested. The price is $848.7.
Is
It's 2 on the
Is
lot.
it vacant or is it occupied?
Well, I'm putting it as occupied. There's a tenant in the front, and the main house is in the back, and it's a 5-bedroom main house. So it's a good size. But
But
it's,
they move out?
the tenant, we already gave them a notice to.
Okay, so they would, the house would be vacant by the time, okay. So I might have
You want
some.
me to for it?
Anyway, I might have a few more questions, but I know where to find you, so I will
Okay.
reach out to you.
Please, yes.
Yes, I
You guys are
will.
like next door to each other, right?
Yes.
You're behind me,
She's-
right?
You're literally right over the wall.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
I'm-
just knock. So just get your list and just slam it on the glass. And then
So we hear that.
Yeah, that's
We're like,
fine.
oh, there she is.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the office where the music comes from. Because we always have music, classic rock going on.
Okay, so I'll definitely swing by there. Probably, are you gonna be there tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll be back in like 3 hours.
Okay.
2 hours.
All right. Okay, good. This was a great
Hi,
question.
what is the best app for searching?
So if you don't want to spend any money, use LoopNet.
No.
That's it. How do you promote your listing?
LoopNet, Corexy, Catalyst, CoStar,
MLS.
MLS, Craigslist, sometimes. We're actually gonna hit some Craigslist.
So there's a lot of money that you have to put in
Yes.
per month
Yes.
to.
But the transactions luckily are larger. So we do less transactions, but they're bigger.
And the competition is higher. So you gotta remember that.
Our competition is
Mhm.
higher.
In commercial, competition is a lot higher, a lot more savvier, and more hungrier. So you gotta get hungrier than them.
Like
You gotta get
everyone,
savvier than them.
our competition are USC grads, Harvard grads, Yale grads, who are generational brokers,
Yeah.
whose dad sells 50 of the large ones that I showed you, 50 of them a year, and the son graduated from USC. Now he's doing it under his dad,
And he gave him a couple.
Using.
and he gave him a couple deals to do. That's who we compete with. Yeah,
using
And
the same
Hispanic?
connection.
there's like what 3 Hispanic brokers,
And we're two.
and we're 2. Carlos, yeah.
So you don't need USC or Harvard.
No, you don't. It helps though. It definitely
It definitely
helps.
helps.
We have a
I often say I am from
transaction
USC,
coordinator
though.
for commission.
I don't need a transaction coordinator for commercial.
No
I've never used the TC. I do all the paperwork myself. Remember, there's only 4 disclosures, and you send 3 of them in the beginning. Actually, send all of them.
Can
So like that.
Can I have your number?
Sure.
What is it?
I have a card here. I'll leave a couple cards in here.
You can just give me your number, I'll save it.
213-700-8831.
213.
I'll give you a card.
7008.
Yeah, I'll take the card too, because if I have any commercial, I can refer them over to you, right?